these are all of our needles laying down flat, and you want to do this to make sure that you're going to have the prettiest pleating job that you can have. And so you see how they're shaped. There's this curve here. This curve is very specific to which pleating machine you're using. So when you lay them all down and that's not the same curve, then you've got an incorrect needle. They also need to be the same length here. You can also see here, these are some we've used a little bit. You can see that they're kind of bending, this one here and this one here are kind of bending upwards. We're still gonna get a nice pleating job, but this is not gonna be the most beautiful. These need to all look really consistent, and that would tell you if you need to change your needles before you start your next project. All right, so now we have the rod out of the pleater. And one thing to check at this point, just for movement, you see how well these two rods are moving against each other. When you see down here, it's hard to tell them, but it's kind of sticking, and you can see the culprit. See, this is all of our projects. You can see that we've left behind lots of little strands that we need to remove. I'm using our good old happy seam ripper to get down into this crevice, but that's a great way to clean up both this side and this side before we put our needles back in. At this point, we're now putting in our needles. Depending on how your pleater works, this is an Amanda Jane. You might have half rows, or we're going in every other space, so that these are more of your traditional size rows. But you've got the position to put in more needles. You want to lay in your needle after you've checked your needles to see that they're all in good working order, and that divot just lays down in the middle there in that row. And then you take your top rod gear and it sets right on top of those, and take your pins, and the pins go into the side to secure that in place. This particular pleater, these pins are slightly different size. The shorter one would go on this end and the longer on this end. You might have a pleater that uses screws on the side. You would loosen the screws and they would come out slightly so you could take this rod out, but you would never pull the screw fully out because you'll never be able to get them back in. But once you get those positioned back in, you are, your needles are set in place and you're ready to thread. So if you're using some old needles, or just needles that you haven't used after a while but you've checked them and you know that they're the right size, the couple of things that you can do to get everything moving a lot easier. This is a great little product. It's called Thread Magic. We certainly use it when you're doing your handwork, hand embroidery, your smocking, but you can also use it for your smocking needles. You just take your needles and dip them down, the tips, and then that would be the step that you do before putting them in. Alternately, you can put in some good old just wax paper, and you just run this through the machine, and you'll be amazed at how this little bit of lubrication will really help everything just move a lot smoother. Okay, now it's time to thread the needle. You can either go from top down, or you can go from the bottom up. It does not matter which way you do. What does matter is that you're consistent all the way across. Many of you might want to use a threader because it's difficult for you to see, in which case you are definitely going to be going from the bottom to the top. But again, the most important thing is just to, whichever way that you choose, that you are consistent in the amount of tails that you leave, as well as which direction you go when you thread your needles. So now we're going to pleat just a straight edge. You kind of want to lay it down. You want to figure out from either side that there's the same amount on this side as there is on this side. Kind of want to get it going. And some have been taught or really love using a dowel to which you would roll your fabric onto that dowel. Generally speaking, that can get in your way. So a little trick if you're not using a dowel is you're watching over here on this side to keep it consistently straight, and you're holding your fabric down. That will help you as you are pleating to know if you need to pull it a little bit on this side or pull it a little bit on this side. Now, when you're learning to pleat or getting back at it, you know, the best thing to do is to practice with an insertion like this. This is a white broadcloth. You know, there's not a big deal about needing the right seam allowance here, or you're not putting through a bishop, which we will show you with your sleeves. But you just keep turning. Some of you might be lucky enough to have a motor. That's basically just a small motor that helps crank these gears together, but many of you will do it by hand. And when you get down to the end of your needle, and you've got some stacked up pleats right here, you just kind of pull them off, and it'll show you when it's time to do that. Every fabric acts a little bit different, and so you kind of want to watch for when your fabric needs, and you just continue to go this way. You'll have your perfect pleated piece ready for smocking.